This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay. Shalom Aleichem, welcome everyone. Baruch haba, Freilichen Chanukah. Hope everybody's having a nice Chanukah. Tonight is the last night, of course. I want to thank Rabbi Brett and his staff for putting together the material for this week, even though it's Chanukah and people are very busy, but the Seder continues. Baruch Hashem, thank you everyone for joining. And we proceed today with the next Malacha. And I want to remind everyone, the Shiurim are available on TorahAnytime.com. They're now available on podcast and Shas Illuminated. And we continue with the fourth Malacha, which is Ma'amer. Ma'amer is gathering. Now, just going to mute everybody. Ma'amer is the fourth Malacha, gathering. Where was gathering done in the Mishkan? Well, as we said, by plowing and by planting and by harvesting, they would plant herbs used to dye the various curtains and tapestries in the Mishkan. And according to the Rishonim, especially Rashi, who holds that the malachos are those malachos that are necessary in building the Mishkan, the malach of gathering was needed when the herbs were ready and they had to be gathered for the sake of building the Mishkan. According to those Rishonim who learn that the malachos are those which are needed for the upkeep of the Mishkan, gathering was needed to gather the wheat for the lechem hapanim, me'amer. So now let's begin. What is the av malacha of ma'amer? The Rambam writes in Hilchos Shabbos, Parak Ches Halacha Hey, one who gathers food to eat, even if you gather the amount which is the size of a geroi geres, a dried fig, one is chayiv. So gathering food items to eat is considered a violation of ma'amer. That is the av malacha. The tolda of ma'amer is one who presses together, one who gathers figs and he makes a round cake of figs. So he's now consolidating food items. Or if, let's say, someone strings together figs and puts a rope through them until they become one entity and they coalesce, this is a tolda of ma'amer. So the av malacha is gathering food items, the tolda is consolidating food items, and the isur d'Rabbanan is as follows. One whose fruits scatter in his courtyard, you pick up one at a time. But don't put them into a basket or into a box the way you do during the week, because otherwise we're afraid you may press them together and consolidate them together to become one entity. Now, very interesting. Says the Gemara in Shabbos, on Daf Ayin Gimel. By the way, the Malacha D'Oraisa Ma'amer is only when you gather to put it to positive use, to eat, to save. But let's say you gather to throw out. Let's say you're gathering rotten fruits, or you're sweeping sawdust to throw out, or you're raking leaves. Let's say you want to make a pile of leaves. My kids love to rake the leaves in the backyard, and then they jump in it. So raking leaves for the sake of creating a pile to throw them out, that is not ma'amer d'oraisa. But if you're raking the leaves to make a pile to make compost, so that is d'oraisa because you're gathering it for a constructive purpose. Now, says the Gemara in Shabbos Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, Amar Rava, one who gathers salt from a salt pool is chayiv for ma'amer. So now here for the first time we're having gathering of something that doesn't grow from the ground. Salt does not grow from the ground. Abaye says no, that is not ma'amer. You know why that's not ma'amer? Ein imur ela b'gedulei karka. Gathering is only applicable of something that grows from the ground. And since salt does not grow from the ground, therefore it is not considered gathering. Rava was of the opinion, yes, if you gather salt from a salt pool, that is ma'amer, and Abaye says no. Comes the Rambam, Parak Ches Halacha Hey, he paskins like Abaye, Ein imur ela b'gedulei karka. Gathering is only something that grows from the ground. However, the question is, the Rambam paskins, you're not allowed to gather salt from a salt pool, because it looks like ma'amer. So the Maggid Mishnah says that the Rambam agrees, midai raisa, you're only chayiv if it grows from the ground. But because salt has some kind of an appearance as if it grows from the ground, then there's an Isser D'Rabbanan of gathering salt from a salt pool. So now a few things occur to me. Number one, maybe we can understand Esav's question. Remember Esav's shaila? He used to ask his father, do you have to give meiser off salt? And we always say, that's a shaila of shtus, that's shtuyot, that's a ridiculous question. Of course you don't give meiser off salt. It doesn't grow from the ground. But just like by ma'amer, there's an Isser D'Rabbanan of gathering salt because it has the appearance as if it grows from the ground. Maybe Esav's question was, midrabanan, maybe you have to give salt off, maybe you have to give meiser off salt. Okay, but putting that aside, what would the halacha be if your kid gets into your fork, into your utensil drawer, and spills out all your utensils? They're strewn across the kitchen floor. Now you want to gather them. Is there any isser in gathering forks? And the answer is absolutely not. Forks don't grow from the ground, and they don't even have the appearance as if they grow from the ground, and there's no isser of gathering items which clearly do not grow from the ground. Now, the Gemara says another important factor. Mevi'in eitzim min ha'sadeh min ha'mechunas u'min ha'karpef afilu min ha'mefuzar. Says the Gemara. It's actually a Mishnah. You're allowed to collect wood from a field, wood that was previously gathered, and it's in an enclosure. You could collect it even if it's strewn about. That's the Gemara. The Gemara says, so you have wood, the wood is strewn everywhere, and you're allowed to consolidate it and gather it from the field into a gathered area. Comes Tosfos, and Tosfos asks, what are you talking about? You're allowed to gather wood that's strewn all about the field? What about ma'amer? This is an av malach of ma'amer. Aren't you gathering? This is classic gathering. This is wood. It grows from the ground, and this should be ma'amer. Says Tosfos, a very important principle in ma'amer. Says Tosfos, lo shayich imur ela b'makom shegedelim sham. Imur is only applicable where it grows. But this wood sort of came out of its, is in the field. It didn't grow there. And it's not in the place that it grew. Tosfos says a very important principle that ma'amer is only applicable in a situation, in a case where the items grew. And Tosfos brings this a proof from Rava's statement. Rava, we quoted earlier, says that if you collect salt from the salt pool, then you're chayiv. But if it's not from the salt pool, if it's from elsewhere, then it's not in the place that it even looks like it grew, one would not be chayiv for ma'amer. So this is a very important principle. Number one, ein imor ela b'gedulei karka. There's only an issur of gathering on something that grew from the ground. Number two, ein imor ela b'makom shegadal. It's only ma'amer in a place where it grew. If it's elsewhere, then it's not ma'amer, which would be a very important leniency. That means if you want to gather something in your house where the item did not grow, we're going to see maybe there is room for more leniency. Now, here's another important principle of ma'amer that is mentioned by the Aruch HaShulchan and Siman Shin Mem. And that is, we mentioned wood grows from the ground, and therefore it's subject to imor. However, that's only where it grew. What about wooden toys? And in some homes, obviously not in my house, kids make a mess. It's amazing. My kids were born; they don't make messes. It's a remarkable thing. But there are children that they sometimes make a mess, and what about cleaning up their toys? So the kids might say, "Oh, did you hear Rabbi Glatstein Shiur? We're not allowed to clean up toys on Shabbos." No, we never said that. Now, why would you be allowed to clean up wooden toys? They grow from the ground. They're made out of wood. So the Aruch HaShulchan says a svara that if even food items are baked or cooked, you can now gather them. So maybe you can't gather fruits, but once the fruits are cooked or baked and it's nishtanu marisam, their appearance changes, then it is permitted to cook them and bake them. And the reason is, it has a different form, it has a different appearance, and it's considered nishtanu marisam. So we have 3 rules so far. It has to grow from the ground, it has to be where it grew, and it has to be in its raw state. These are 3 qualities of imor. Now, I know that your favorite part of the shiur is when we learn which siman in Shulchan Aruch are the laws of imor in. In which siman do we have the laws of bundling, of making a pile? So amazingly, it's in siman shin mem. Siman shin mem. Now, how are we going to remember that? So this is here's a great mnemonic. You're never going to forget this, because the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, Adaf Tzadi Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara says, you know, when the Jews were in the Midbar, it says in Shalach, they found a man. He was mekoishesh eitzim. He was being mekoishesh wood. Says the Gemara, what does it mean? He was mekoishesh eitzim. So Rabbi Huda says in the name of Shmuel, he was carrying wood. In a brayso we taught he was uprooting trees. Rav Yaakov said he was ma'amer. So the first ma'amer was the mekoishesh. Yeah? So now the question is, what was the mekoishesh's name? Do you remember the sugya? The Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva said his name was Tzlavchad. That's why the Bnei Tzlavchad had a Yerusha, because their father was killed, because he was the mekoishesh. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, Rabbi Akiva, you're going to be punished for revealing this piece of information. If you're right, the Torah doesn't say his shame, siman shin mem, so how do you have a right to? And if you're wrong, and you said his shame, siman shin mem, then you made up a story about Tzlavchad. So the first ma'amer was a man whose shame shall remain nameless, right? He doesn't have a shame. We're not allowed to say his name unless you're Rabbi Akiva. So the way you remember ma'amer is in siman shin mem. Just think about the mekoishesh, who there's a question whether we're allowed to say his shame. I knew you would like that one. Okay, so in siman shin mem are the laws of ma'amer. Now, the Gemara says as follows. Interesting halacha. The Gemara says on Daf Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Beis, Tanu Rabbanan, Nispazru loy peiros b'chatzar. If, let's say, your apples mekoishesh eitzim. So somebody's suggesting mekoishesh eitzim. His first letter was mem and his last mekoishesh. Oh, mekoishesh is Rashi Teva, shame. Okay, not bad. Or his soifei tevos, mekoishesh eitzim. That's a good one. We're not going to forget that one. Okay, so the Gemara says if your fruits spill in the yard, you could gather them one by one, but don't put them in a basket the way you do during the week, because during the week is a weekday kind of activity. However, the Rambam adds, not only is putting the fruits in a basket a weekday activity, but we're afraid you're going to stick the fruits together and you're going to be over the da'iraisa of consolidating the fruits. So here's the question. Wait a second. The Rambam is saying you can't gather fruits from your yard because you might stick them together, and so what if you stick them together? You're not gathering them in the place they grew. They fell out in your chutzner. They didn't grow in the chutzner. I thought one of the guidelines we said of ma'amer is it's only considered bundling if you gather it in the place that it grew. It didn't grow in your chutzner. So it seems like sometimes you are chayev for gathering something that is being gathered not in the place that it grew, and sometimes it's only a problem if you gathered it in the place that it grew. So let's try to establish and understand, when is it ma'amer only in the place that it grew, and when is it even ma'amer if it is gathered elsewhere? So an interesting way to delve into this question is a shaila that was brought to the attention of Rav Moshe Feinstein Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. let's say somebody has loose flowers in their house. A loose flower is not muksa on Shabbos. You could smell it. It's not, a flower is not muksa. Now you want to make a bouquet of flowers on Shabbos. Are you allowed to make a bouquet of flowers on Shabbos? So you say, what could possibly be wrong? The flowers are not muksa, and now I'm making a group of flowers. The Nishmas Adam, in trying to understand the opinion of the Rambam, who we know the Rambam says you're only chayev for something in the place that it grew, and yet the Rambam holds you can't gather fruits in a basket because you might stick them together, but it didn't grow in your courtyard. So the Nishmas Adam says a very interesting chiddush. There are two kinds of ma'amer. There's making a pile of something, and then there is consolidating it into one mass. There's making something, taking loose items and just piling them up, and all that does is, now they're in one place and the wind won't blow it away. And then they're taking different items and just sticking them together, stringing them together, pressing them together. Says the Nishmas Adam, if you're merely gathering and making a pile, that is asur only in the place that they grew. But if you're stringing them together or sticking them together and you're consolidating them so that they become one mass, that will be prohibited even in a place that they didn't grow. And the Mishnah Brura concedes to this differentiation that in a house, to stick things together that they should become one mass would be prohibited. So what would you say about making a bouquet of flowers on Shabbos? On the one hand, you would say you're taking disparate items, and what if you even put a rubber band around them? Aren't you making something into a pile? Well, you'll say a pile. The flowers didn't grow in the house. If they didn't grow in the house, I'm allowed to make a pile. Yeah, but I'm making more than a pile. I'm binding them together as one entity. Says Rav Moshe, not so fast. Why would that be ma'amer? When you make a bouquet of flowers, are you trying to bind together one mass? Are you trying to make a pile of flowers? You're trying to aesthetically create a very pleasing presentation of beautiful flowers with complementary items that enhance the visual appearance of the particular flowers that you use. So you might take a couple of tulips, and you might take some other shrubs or other growth, and you put it together. You're not trying to create one consolidated item. You're not trying to amass something. You're trying to have a arrangement of various items that one's appearance complements the other. So Rav Moshe is not boror that this would be prohibited, because Rav Moshe seems to be saying, and I'll read to you his words. He says, "Loi boror zelani as daiti." Says Rav Moshe in Chelek Dalid Siman Ayin Gimel. It is not clear to me that the malacha of gathering many stalks into one mass is applicable over here. Aval kibbutz haprachim eino inyan kibbutz harema. You're not trying to make a mound of flowers. Would anybody say, "Hey, that's a nice pile of flowers you have in that vase"? You really amassed and piled nice flowers together. If anybody hears you say that, your wife's going to say, "Take them back to the store. I don't want a pile of flowers. I don't want you to amass pirachim on the table. I want a nice presentation." Would you say that when you have a bouquet, it's an amassment or it's a pile? No. Says Rav Moshe, Elohu kibbutz prachim shoinim. It's just a gathering of various flowers, sheyasimu lazeh, that they should be complementary of each other. This is not really applicable to the malacha of arema, of plowing. And interestingly, in the Sefer Meital, he brings that the essence and the definition of ma'amer is accumulating items in a pile. So this way, they're protected, they're consolidated, they won't be scattered. But if this is not your intention, now what would you say about the following? Maybe a differentiation could be made in terms of the bouquet of flowers. If you have put together 24 roses, maybe you could make the argument, yes, you are trying to make an arema, a pile, a gathering. You know, what's impressive about 24 roses is the sheer, yes, the beauty of the flower, but the quantity and the gathering of, but if it's a bouquet with just a collection of various flowers that each one's appearance is complementary to each other, maybe that would be different. Lamaisa, Rabbi Shimon Eider concludes that it is prohibited to make a bouquet of flowers, and he gives a completely different svara, namely, his svara is that making a bouquet of flowers is considered tikkun maneh. In other words, you have various items that each one on themselves is not a finished product, and by putting them together in the right arrangement, the right order, and the right presentation, you're creating a finished product and a new entity. Okay, so Marv Rabbi say, the bottom line is that if your forks spill out in your house, you could gather them together for a number of different reasons. Number one, metal forks don't grow on the ground. Number two, they're processed. Number three, they did not spill out where they come from. Items, now this is interesting. Even though we said that our being ma'amer is only shayach on something that grows from the ground, we did mention that salt might be ma'amer midrabanan because it has the appearance that it grows from the ground. And therefore, stones, precious metals, items that are mined from the ground, even though they don't technically grow from the ground, but they do give off the appearance that they come from the ground, that would also be a violation of ma'amer. The reason being, it's a d'Rabbanan. They're d'Rabbanan that the same way something that grows from the ground is considered gidulei karka. These items that are mined from the ground have the appearance of gidulei karka. But again, only if you gather for a positive use. If you're gathering to discard, it would be permitted. So of course you could sweep up your floor on Shabbos from even food that fell on the floor. That is not ma'amer at all. It didn't grow in your house, and we're not dealing with raw food items. As the Aruch HaShulchan said, something that is cooked or baked, ma'amer does not apply to. So indoors, you could clean up your kitchen, you could clean up your dining room, you could clean up your playroom. It's more applicable for fruits. But if you happen to have an apple tree in your backyard, even to collect 2 apples and gather them together, that would be a d'oraisa of ma'amer. Okay, so it's somewhat of a more condensed subject. I could take questions if there are any, and then Be'ez Hashem wish everyone a freilichen Zois Chanukah, and we'll see everybody next Thursday. Sure.
So quick question. Say you're giving a shiur on Shabbos from your papers. You now finish your shiur, you gather your papers together, or you gather your papers together and you put a rubber band on them, which is what you started off with. Are you saying that is therefore gathering?
Well, in that case, we have many factors why that's not gathering. First of all, your papers are processed, so even though you're right, it is gidulei karka, but it's a finished product. It's not raw. It's not a raw product. Number two, they didn't grow in the shul. Number three, there's another interesting halacha. Something that was once gathered and then became dispersed, to gather it again, ein ma'amer acher ma'amer. That's also another rule that we didn't mention, is there's no gathering after gathering. So, in that case it would be permitted, and you could even put a rubber band around it, and you could even roll it up and put a rubber band around it. That would be permitted.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. This will wrap up today's shiur, and now that today's shiur is a finished product, there's no Isser Ma'amer on bundling it up. Wishing everybody a wonderful Shabbos and a Freilich and Chanukah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Kol Tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.